Hey, welcome everybody. It's the Husker247 Podcast. I'm Brian Christopherson. I'm joined by Michael Bruntz. Good to see you, Michael. It's been busy, and that's good. And it's good for Husker football because the recruits just keep coming. Last night on the radio, Trev Albert said the spring game, it's going to be a football game. And I got the impression he meant it's going to be an actual, they're going to really go after it. It's not going to be patty cake or anything like that. One reason could be because each side can have about 85 guys, I think, Bruntz.
Each side is going to have about 60 scholarship guys to throw into the mix. I would for one would welcome a football game in the spring. I wouldn't hate that. But yeah, it's another week. We're one week away from what are we calling the second National Signing Day? It's like the return, like signing day, the return, like it's the sequel. But we're a week away. Nebraska continues to add players and transfers. We're getting up close to a deadline where they can no longer take both, which seems to be about the only thing that's stopping this staff from adding players. But do we just want to quickly go through what happened this week for anybody that's had their head in the sand and kind of put it in the context, I think, of what this roster is going to look like, which it seems like is shifting day to day.
Yeah. By the way, the second signing day is it's like a family get together where people bring different, food items, and someone's brought a dessert, and it's not as good as someone else's, but they ask, what do you want? You ever had a thing where there's like 3 desserts and you feel like how about a little of everything? You got to say that. And this is the one that's maybe not quite as good as the other one. But you'll still eat it, and maybe it's pretty good still and it does obviously matter to the kids who are signing. I need to say that as well. So it's important to them.
So signing day is like the Jell-O salad that you don't really want. It's like the green Jell-O with like some orange slices in there.
I don't know, but it's just not the best thing on the plate, but it's not the worst thing. It's there, and you'll eat it, and you're not going to complain about it, because there's a boring Detroit Lions game on in the background. Lions are getting better. I know, Lions fans. I'm sorry. But yes, there were some commitments. Let's get to that. Let's start with Bob Wager's school, his old school, Arlington
Pipeline, the Martin Pipeline.
Arlington Martin High School down in Texas, where the new Husker tight ends coach was the head man for 17 years. I just read a story about him, by the way, that's on the site, and he left a big impression down there. I think that's a really good hire Rhule made, and we'll see how it plays out. But Ismail Smith Flores, I always have to be careful I don't miss the name or put it Flores Smith. But did I do it right? Ismail Smith Flores.
Yep, you nailed it.
And Jeremiah Charles. And both are really interesting, Bruntz, because you've talked to Smith Flores more than I have, so I'll let you talk about him. But all are pretty new to the game, even though Smith Flores' dad was an Iowa legacy guy.
A very good player at Iowa.
Yes, very good. He's in their Hall of Fame. But it's always seemed like after Nebraska became involved, like they were the team for him, even though there was that Iowa connection from his family. What say you about that one?
Yeah, and you can speak to it after I do about just both of those guys. You've talked to the coaching staff down there, but very similar with, Smith Flores was always a basketball guy who finally convinced his family to let him play football his senior year. He'd wanted to for a long time. Had a decent start to the year as recruitment started to take off. Iowa was definitely in it early. And I kind of got the sense from talking to him early on, when Nebraska started getting involved after they'd hired Bob Wager, was that I didn't get the sense that Iowa was a real threat, especially after he didn't sign in December. Rutgers had offered. He visited Rutgers. He had, I think, 2 or 3 cousins that played at Rutgers. There's one on the team now there. But I think the relationship with Bob Wager certainly, put Nebraska over the top. I mean, that's not breaking news there, but every time I talked to him, he'd always say, that's my guy. That's, the guy that always looks out for me. Extra bonus, he's going to be your position coach. And he admits that he's a raw prospect. I mean, he's played 1 year of football. It was at wide receiver. It wasn't even at tight end, but Nebraska's going to kind of flex him out. He told me after he committed, that Marcus Satterfield is going to do a lot of 12 personnel, some 13 personnel as well. So they're going to be leaning on the tight ends there. And, I think he's a pretty good long-term prospect, good frame that you can put some weight on and get just kind of developing him and get him comfortable with playing football. Because like I said, I mean, he's still, by his own admission, very, very raw.
Yeah, I was told by his position coach down at Arlington Martin that basically he could just body guys out. Like he had that. I mean, even though he's going to grow more into his frame, he was already at the high school level, that type of guy where it's like he could bounce off guys and stuff, like you just saw that potential. Bob Wager, I mean, he's had a ton of success coaching in Texas, but also I think people need to know he's been involved with like the Under Armour game for like 10 years and was the head coach of that game just recently. And so he knows what like top FBS guys look like. And he coached Myles Garrett, who was a number 1 draft pick too. So he has a resume that tells you that he's got a pretty good eye for like who can play at this level and who can't, for anybody who's like, I don't know, these guys have only played 1 year. I understand that part of it, but that people got to get used to that, Bruntz, around here, because that Rhule's staff, if they see enough on film and then you can put it with certain measurables, they're going to say we can develop that.
You mentioned, talking to the position coaches down at Arlington Martin. I'm curious, what did they tell you about Jeremiah Charles? Because I think he was a little bit more of that kind of off the radar prospect. And we didn't even have a profile for him at 247 Sports before Nebraska offered. What did you learn about him? And does he kind of fit that same mold of, Bryce Turner, Jalen Lloyd, of a track guy with really great long-term potential?
Some of that, but what's interesting is Smith Flores kind of came on the radar around here like a few days beforehand, because I think he got the first offer of the two. But people shouldn't confuse that. Jeremiah Charles is probably, according to the coach down there, maybe even a little less raw than Smith Flores. I mean, they're both about the same as far as how much they've played. In Jeremiah Charles' case, he actually came out and played some his freshman year with his twin brother, Josiah. And then Jeremiah stepped away and was going to focus more on basketball, which he's very good at. In fact, it's a great story, which we wrote about it last week. I'm not saying I had a great story, but the story itself is great of how he had 22 points, 4 dunks, blocked shots when Matt Rhule was in the gym like last Tuesday or whenever it was, and that Nebraska offered him after that. So he's a great basketball player, but his senior year, he's like, I want to play football again. And so they had a meeting with him, his twin brother, and his mom, and talked about it. And he got going in the spring. So that's his advantage over Smith Flores, is that he had that extra time to sort of work on some of the, the finer points of being a receiver and all that. But yeah, he could just run past people, they said. He's got a pretty strong triple jump, and I think he was a little injured last year, if I remember right. So he's probably going to go even further now with his triple jump numbers. And I think probably was on the cusp of some basketball type stuff too, like he was in that AAU circuit and things like that. So he is really the definition of a multi-sport athlete, and just looked the part in front of Rhule. Rhule did his thing where he tweets, sort of things, coding where you got to figure out what it means.
Emojis.
Oh, that's what they call them.
Coding?
Yeah, those coding things. Emojis. I'm getting so old so fast. I gotta fight against it. I should know that without
in your defense. I mean, it's hard to do emojis when you're texting with the T9. So
you'd have to say I don't use a lot of emojis with you.
Not a big emoji guy.
No, I'm a haha guy over an LOL guy though. We could get into that sometime.
Yeah.
But, are you an LOL or a haha?
No,
guy?
we're team haha.
Okay, good. I feel like it's a little more, like
yeah.
Anyhow, the coding that Matt Rhule used. He had some that night when he was in Arlington watching him play basketball, and those who knew what was happening could figure it out. He was blown away by Jeremiah Charles and like his athletic ability. We haven't talked to him about it. He couldn't say it. He can't say that on the record yet, but that's what his coding led us to believe.
His coding seemed to imply that he has seen things he hadn't seen before. So I mean, both of those guys, offensive skill players. Demetrius Bell the same way, who committed yesterday. I'm not anticipating either of those guys from Martin stepping in right away and being counted on. But the way that Nebraska has kind of continued to add wide receivers and pass catchers since Marcus Satterfield said that he was looking for different body types and that was an area of concern. What's your level of concern as we sit here on January 25th with 16 scholarship wide receivers right now? And I don't even think that counts Betts and Garcia Castaneda. Like, is the status of Nebraska's wide receiver room keeping you up at night right now?
No. I like how you phrase that.
Yeah.
I was watching old Mad Men episodes last night, so that's what was keeping me up. But no, I do think what's interesting about it, first off, you know what is also not keeping me up? The numbers situation. Like, I know
you're not just sitting there like, God,
how are they going to get to 85, man?
Yeah.
Like, they'll get there. Is that a bad way to look at it as a reporter? I think in our neck of the woods, we get obsessed like, oh man, 101 or whatever. And it's like that. I don't know. They're going to get there some way, somehow. I don't know with the new NIL thing, if you can construct creative ways to. I'm not sure on that. That seems like it could be a possibility where you could have a few floaters that could be financially covered, but we'll see. But anyway, there's going to be some guys who probably depart. There has to be, I guess, if you do the math, and we'll document it as it comes. So I'm not worried about that. And I'm not worried that there's a ton of wide receivers right now, because it'll sort itself out. And I think that's what you have to do in this era of college football, is you have to build as much competition as you can. I think that's what's happening in this first spring. And like, roll the ball out there. You can't really roll it. It's not like basketball, but you know what I mean? Let it wobble out there. And let's see who's got it and who doesn't. The thing I'd say is they have enough guys with at least something on their resume at receiver that they should be okay. Like, it shouldn't be a bad group. I mean, Marcus Washington is a quality college receiver. We know that. Alante Brown is like a really good, like, just football guy. We know that from like everything about his special teams involvement and all that stuff. He'll be useful. Xavier Betts and Garcia Castaneda, if even one of those two just hits their stride, and if both of them hit it, well, you've got a lot solved right there. So I think they're going to be fine at that position. I don't want to act like they're great there yet. I don't think we should do that. But I also believe they've stocked up somebody in that room. A new guy is going to be a home run threat that I think will emerge sooner than later. And I don't know which guy it's going to be. It'd be stupid to try to predict it. But they've got 3 or 4 guys, you'd say now, Bruntz, who are just like burners and can be that. Maybe they're not a 5-catch-a-game guy, but they're that guy who has that 58-yard play like in week 3 where we're writing a sidebar about them. There's somebody from that group, it feels like, that's going to emerge.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's almost like you need somebody out of that group to have kind of like a Matt Harrion in 2002 type stat line, where he's like, you're averaging like 30 a catch. You have like seven catches in the season or something like that. And they all seem to be significant, like something
Yeah.
like that. And they also got Billy Kemp, another guy that they've added that I think kind of calmed things down a little bit in my mind for that group. But anyways, we diverted there. Demetrius Bell, let's talk about him real quick. Added out of the out of Tennessee, commits yesterday. Had a pretty impressive offer list, but it seems like they've kind of got something going in Central Tennessee there in this class.
Yeah, they do. Because Jacob Hood, who's from the portal edition, who we can get to also in more detail, out of Georgia, offensive lineman. He's from the Nashville area. Demetrius Bell is Sincere Safe. I don't know how to say it. I'm sorry. Seifola. He's from that area. The defensive back was at IMG Academy, but he's from Nashville area. Those three are all really tight. So as much as like even with Jacob Hood, we'll talk about the Georgia guys and their connection. It must be nice having your buddies from Georgia here. I think more than anything for like Jacob Hood, he mentioned Demetrius Bell and Sincere as guys who they grew up playing together. He had a great quote: praying together, playing together, all that stuff like that. That's who they were. So they're buddies. So after Hood said he was in, it's like, well, Demetrius Bell's probably joining too. He's another guy though you'd put in that category of he could be a real speed weapon who maybe that helps a guy pop on the field even while he's figuring out the finer points of playing receiver at the college level. Like you can be that guy who can go in for certain plays and you can be a home run threat like you're talking about, who maybe they don't have high volume catches, but they have them in large chunks. And that's why I'm glad you brought up Billy Kemp, because I didn't mention him. And Billy Kemp's probably the thing that stabilizes everything, because his resume suggests a guy who can be the high volume catcher while others develop. So that's pretty useful.
Yeah. And I mean, we'll see how, well, especially the wide receiver spot. I mean, a lot of these guys aren't going to be here in the spring. So right now you kind of have this just mass pack of guys that are going to be trying to win spot. I mean, basically playing for roster spots, I think, trying to earn reps, and that's going to shake out however it's going to do. And then, you're adding these guys that are kind of the toolsier wide receivers, I guess would be the best way to put it, coming in the summer behind him. I mean, in my mind, there's a group of maybe like 4 or 5 guys that I would put in kind of that, high competition area this spring that somebody needs to emerge from. The Sean Hardys, the Victor Jones Juniors, Janarian Bonner's probably in that group as well, of guys that have been around a little bit. That that's kind of the tough part in a transition class, is you need to make an impression quickly, or else you can quickly be replaced or recruited over. So, but I don't know. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I think just getting numbers and increasing competition is the way to do it for a new staff when you're trying to figure out who can and who can't help you.
Yeah, and one thing to note is I think this was important that Matt Rhule did this right off the bat. He said this in his early press conference. He said, if you're on this squad, you're my guy now. And I think that was huge to get that out there right away. He said that again. He did a really good podcast, as I expected it would be, with Bussin' with the Boys and Will Compton and Taylor Lewan. And he mentioned that again. But that's got to be good to hear if you're like the receivers you're talking about. It's like, okay, I want a fighting shot here, and I feel like they're going to get it. Like Bonner, let's not forget, like Bonner was a big time prospect. I mean, he's a guy who has a lot on his resume from high school that is intriguing. And I think he popped up on the travel roster, I think, a time or two. Am I right? You're kind of giving me that. I thought he did.
Yeah, I think once or twice. Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. But Victor Jones Jr. had a nice high school career down in Orlando. So I like the fact though that it's like, hey, this isn't going to be wait till we get our guys in here. You can't look at it that way. And I think that's really been stressed to players, so that has to encourage them.
Yeah. Last guy that we can hit on here before we talk a little hoops, Jacob Hood. I was going through old rosters, and for some reason in my mind, one of the biggest offensive linemen I remember covering at Nebraska was Jamel Phillips. Had a great nickname, the Big Smooth. Didn't stick at Nebraska long, but he was listed at like 6'6", 350, 355, something like that.
Big Smooth was?
Yeah.
I wish I had that nickname.
Yeah. I mean, we could start calling you the Big Smooth. I don't know that it would get the desired reaction that you'd want, but
it's like Costanza trying to call himself T-Bone. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. So Jacob Hood is a little bit bigger than Jamel Phillips, at least from what he's listed. So you're getting another Georgia player, a little bit of a different situation, I think it's fair to say, than some of the other Georgia transfers. I think this is a little bit more of a long-term developmental play, but you're going to bring him in and give him a shot to try to earn some time. And a little bit of a different situation too from Walter Rouse that had started for 4 years, and you were expecting to come in and be a plug and play. I don't know that Hood is necessarily that, at least as we sit here on January 25th.
No, he's more of a development guy probably, but that's a fine adjustment too. I mean, I think if you pigeonhole yourself, if you're like Nebraska's staff where, oh crap, we lost out on Rouse. Now we got to go find a replica of that out there in the portal. Well, good luck with that. Good luck finding that 3 or 4 year starter. That's why it was going to be such an amazing poll, actually, that Nebraska, we thought they could even get 3 guys with the guy from Baylor, and then Rouse and Scott from Arizona State. So they moved on and they said, you know what, this is a guy who Kirby Smart thought he was good enough to come, play for them. Nebraska's, I think, got good intel into the Georgia program on guys. He is a worker, and from the fact that, I mean, we have it documented on our site that when Hood was first committed to Georgia, at one point in his high school career, he'd been apparently up to like 400 pounds, and he lost like 50 to 60 pounds. He's part of a place in Nashville where I think a guy trains some pretty good players, and he's one of them. And he said he's one of the hardest workers he's had. So, I mean, there are guys who will really vouch for him. And just look at it as like you got a guy who's basically a high school recruit here who was a 4-star type of guy who Georgia wanted, who is kind of starting over. And, he hasn't done anything yet, but either of the other guys are coming here from high school. He just happens to be someone who has like a year runway on them. That's basically it.
Yeah, the thing that it does too, I mean, he's a 4-for-4 guy, so he's a little bit ahead of that next crop of guys that Rhule and his staff brought in. He's a few years behind the Ben Harts, the Prohaskas, the Corcorans, those guys that have kind of been counted on at Nebraska for a little while. So it's kind of like that middle filler in the class that Nebraska doesn't. There's some positions where I think they really need help there, whether it's via JUCO transfer, etc., where they've just had guys leave and don't have that kind of next up guy to kind of throw into the mix. And let me ask you this. So the next portal window opens in mid-April. Guys get 15 days to enter, and then they, have to make a decision. They can make a decision after that. But if I set the over-under at 1.5 for the number of Georgia commits that Nebraska adds before the start of fall practice, would you take the over or would you take the under on that?
in the next window?
I don't think they're done.
Oh, yeah, you said that with someone who knows stuff. I I guess I'll take the under, but the sort of the smug way you said that, you said that with like a way like I
I'm
know
just smug.
something.
No, I mean, I
Smug
think
by
that
nature.
I'm just generally smug. No, I mean, I think that Nebraska and Georgia, I think, have some kind of connection there. I mean, obviously, Fran Brown is down there. I think that Matt Rhule looks at Georgia as a program of like, these guys have won back-to-back national championships. Guys in that program know what it takes. I am willing to bring those guys into my program as well. Like I would not be at all surprised if they're not done.
Trev Albert said that on the radio the other night, without bringing up Georgia specifically. He said the portal ain't all bad. You gotta. He didn't say it specifically like that. He used better grammar, but he said, you got 5-star guys who are starting, and you have 4 stars behind them, and they're not playing, and guys want to play, and so there's opportunities there, and yes, the guys who went through whatever goes on in the background at Georgia probably aren't going to be stunned by anything that really happens at Nebraska as far as like, workouts and stuff. I mean, it seems like they've been through it. So, and also you have to think, we've talked about this before. Nebraska's a good landing spot probably as far as Kirby Smart is concerned. Because right now Nebraska's got to build for a while and they're not in their conference. So, well, yeah, that's like a good program to like send your guys. Like, I'm not saying that he's intentionally like, like trying to do that, but if I were him, I'd be like, yeah, that'd be a fine spot for him to land. Where you don't want a guy to end up, unless you just don't think he can hurt you, is across the border at a school that's going to play you, in October. So I think there's probably appeal from both sides to this connection.
He just the second a Georgia guy enters the portal, he immediately gets handed a airplane ticket to Lincoln. Just
we're not, check it out.
We're not saying you need to go here, but you should take a look. Have a little look see.
You want to know something else? It was not as in people's face maybe, but it was subtle. This last weekend, like I saw Nebraska's own Twitter account did it, and Ed Foley, the special teams coordinator, did it as well, where they were showing the playoff game that was going on in the cold and the snow on the ground in Buffalo. And it's like embrace the cold. And of course, you've got guys from the Southeast and stuff who are in town and all in Texas. And I love when Nebraska leans into that. And I think the staff guys who have been in the NFL are going to tell these prospects, look, you want to play big time football? You should come to a place like Nebraska. You should come to a place where you have to play a game once in a while when it's 23 degrees. Because guess what? You're going to play some at the next level and get that in guys' heads. So I like they were doing that too.
Well, they're moving. The NFL supposedly wants neutral site games. So it's gotta happen quick. Embrace the cold now while you can.
Our man Zach Taylor took a sledgehammer to that and kind of had some fun too in the post game about it. I like that.
Yeah, man, Zach Taylor.
He's just on a roll. Like not only obviously what they're doing on the field, but he's just like, I mean, first off, he handled a serious situation with Damar Hamlin as excellent as a person could.
Yep.
And then just the stuff that's not important but is interesting is like after he wins, he like goes into bars like across and just gives out a football and stuff. He's like a man of the people. It's just awesome to watch.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got off topic a little bit there, but some Zach Taylor talk is good, I think.
Yeah. Well, let's say this too. Like Cam Taylor-Britt's having a hell of a rookie year.
Oh yeah. I'm not surprised at that one. I'm not very smart, as you know, but I am not surprised at that.
No. I mean, he from the time he got to Nebraska, you're like, this guy is just guys that are wired just a little bit different. You can tell right away. And as long as like the physical stuff and learning that position matched up well, I mean, he was going to be a guy that you needed to know. I think that was pretty easy to tell.
When he was a freshman, it was a Friday Night Lights camp or something, and he was there. I don't think he'd played yet. Knew he was a great athlete, and there's that fence that separates like the field from the concrete and the stands and stuff. And it's not the highest fence; it's just a normal fence. But
yeah,
he was standing right up next to that red fence. People all know what I'm talking about. And he did like a box jump, so there was no like running start. He was just like, which like if I did that, of course I would kill myself.
You'd clear it.
there would be surgery required on probably the place where you don't want to have surgery. And Cam Taylor-Britt did it. Not that he cleared the fence was not a shock to me because he's a great athlete, but it was like, I mean, a foot and a half above it or something. It was just like, wow. I was like, that guy's a freak. But awesome to see. And let's talk about one more, though. This is changing back to recruiting. Lafotu.
Yeah.
The defensive lineman, Sua, out of California. He also was on a visit. Our guy, Greg Biggins, has had good contact with him about that. It sounded promising.
Yeah, it's his story is kind of unique. He had a knee injury early in his high school career, sophomore year, that kind of bled over a little bit into how much he played his junior season. He was committed to Washington from basically last summer up until November, and then opened his recruitment. And he goes to St. John's Bosco in Southern California, which is about as close to a football factory as you can get. He was part of a 7-man rotation along the defensive line with other, elite Power 5 type guys. And, I think maybe didn't get the chance as much to kind of shine given that. But, a guy that plays really well with his hands. I think he's a little bit of a late bloomer, but where things stand now, he visited Nebraska this past weekend. He was talking about potentially visiting either Indiana or Weber State. He had a teammate that was going to go to Weber State this weekend. I don't know that either of those is still on right now, but I think Nebraska's in a good spot there to potentially sweep their basically last week's visitors for commitments. But, adding a little bit more defensive line depth, I think is really key for Nebraska, and especially guys that you can kind of coach up and bring along a little bit, because that's the position I think where you can do that and lean on a guy like Terrence Knighton to bring those guys along. So I think Nebraska's in a good spot there, but no decision from him as of Wednesday. I think that might actually end up being a signing day decision.
Tony White has pretty good recruiting connections in California too.
Yes.
So I mean, he's gonna know about guys like that who are at Bosco is number one, I think, in max preps, in the country this past
they're loaded.
year. Yeah. So, but that's where you have to have the intel and the past relationships with guys to know, like, okay, what's the 6th or 7th guy at that position look like? Because he could be pretty good still, especially if he had an injury, as is this case. The Weber State thing you mentioned is just kind of interesting to me. I was thinking about how we should do a story sometimes when it's quiet about guys Nebraska has lost to, like, sort of odd programs. Okay, there's been a couple. Like, didn't Willie Taggart steal one time? Like Western Kentucky or something.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Then you get into the whole debate. Then you get into we didn't really want him anyways.
That
kind of a
there
thing.
would be that.
We dropped him. So do we have anything else on football?
I don't think so. I mean, the only other thing of note, well, there is this from the weekend is Jason Machachek.
Machachek.
Jason.
Oh, yeah, this is good. Yeah, we should chat about this a little bit.
He's probably going to be on the defensive line, it sounds like. I mean, that's where the momentum is. We'll see. But that was a switch from like a week or so ago because he was kind of thinking O-line was where it might be. He really liked playing O-line too. His dad played it and was very good at Chadron State. I think he's in the Chadron State Hall of Fame. But yeah, Jason, he is incredibly strong. Like he did 27 reps of 225, he said, which would like stack up really well at the combine. And he wants to hit 30. So, I mean, he's going to arrive in May with already like strength in the weight room that matches most guys. But the fact that they're talking about him as defense and plugging him in all these spots on the D line was interesting. He really liked how Tony White and Terrence Knighton were sort of explaining the different roles he could own there. And I think it got him kind of excited about it. So him and Mason Goldman were both prospects from the last class who were listed as OL, DL, either one sort of guys. We'll see what they do with Goldman. But that's sort of a development there. I wouldn't even call it a minor development for people who follow the roster closely and where guys are at. It might be defense for him.
Yeah, and when you kind of look at what the needs are, it feels like the depth is a little bit better on the offensive line right now than the defensive line. So at least immediately, I think it would make a little bit more sense to start him over on defense and just kind of see how that goes.
My last football question: did you listen to the podcast he did with Bussin' with the Boys? Have you listened to it through?
I have not. No.
Okay. All right. Well, then I won't even go there. I was going to ask if there was something that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to mess up the question.
No, I didn't know if you had heard it yet, and if there was anything that stood out. I'm like halfway through it, so.
Okay. Was there anything that I should be looking for, or that people that stood out to you?
I think the thing that will get the most run is him saying he wouldn't have a camera inside his meeting rooms or whatever, which is maybe
was that a reference to? Yeah,
a little shot, which people around here will appreciate. I can't wait for that frigging game in Boulder. I can't wait for it. You're gonna have so much like. I mean, first off, both teams have a tough like game beforehand. That Colorado plays TCU, who is going to be rebuilding completely, but they play TCU and Nebraska plays Minnesota. But man, I have to think that we're not big national pregame TV guys. People listen to this podcast. We don't watch them a lot, but I have to think like big noon kickoff or college game day is going to be in Boulder for that. One of them.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating too. I mean, when you talk about Nebraska's roster turnover, like Colorado has added just as many. Like it basically between the two teams, you have a complete like new full like 85-man team. Like that's how bad the roster turnover has been at Colorado and Nebraska in the offseason. Like you're going to need a flip card because nobody's going to be familiar.
Might be a true road game too. I'm not doubting Nebraska fans. They'll take the challenge and see how many they can get in there, but those tickets are going to be ridiculously high. And I don't know. I can't picture, I'll put the challenge out. I can't picture it being the same as it was in, what year was that? 19?
19, yeah.
Nebraska had more fans there, I think, in 19, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I don't think it'll be that bad. I think there's a lot of, I think there's going to be a lot of red in the stadium that day, regardless of price.
They're going to meet the mission that's put down before them. That would be funny. That would be one of Nebraska's prouder moments if it's like half Husker fans. That'd be sort of not like in the Notre Dame where they took over Notre Dame Stadium, but with all that's been talked about Deion Sanders, if Nebraska fans accomplish that would be like one of those that they're proud of for like a decade or two.
Yeah. And the like hangover from that loss too, I feel like still sticks with people like in a pretty significant way. Like I was talking to a former player that was on that team, and they basically were like, that's the worst loss I've ever had as a player was losing that game to Colorado the way it happened. And it was, I mean, it was bad. I mean, there's no way around that, but
I don't think one game flipped the Frost era by any means, but if you wanted to just say, okay, you get to pick one game that's like, okay, this really changed where the arrow was pointed, that game would have to maybe be considered because they had such momentum to end that previous year, remember? And there was sort of high hopes, and they played a clunker of a game the first week where they could barely move the ball in South Alabama, but they're up 17-0 on Colorado and then up 10 in the fourth quarter, and they give up a flea flicker, all that stuff. But anyway, that would have been, I feel like, if they had won that game, maybe there's a little momentum. But anyway, that's old news.
Speaking of not old news, should we transition to basketball real quick?
Yeah.
Who is, without another key piece for the rest of the season? Emmanuel Bandoumel out with a knee injury. How does Nebraska get around that? Because that feels like a big loss. Big loss.
Yeah, this one sucks because Bandoumel, unlike Gary, can't play anymore. This is it. That's it for his college career. I don't think there's any – nowadays you're always thinking about, wait, is there a COVID exception here or something like where he can – and it's all used up. So they just have to get him rehabbed and on to like his next pro mission, because I think he can play somewhere and make money playing this game because he's such an energy guy and such a great defender.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're going to miss the most. You saw it even after he got hurt against Penn State Saturday. They lost 76-65. And Nebraska's defense has been pretty solid for most of the year. And Penn State shot 68% in the second half. Basically every time down the floor got what they wanted. And Nebraska was actually playing okay on offense themselves in that game in the second half, I thought, for who they are. And they just couldn't get over the hump because Penn State kept scoring every trip. And so you're going to miss Bandoumel just because of the pressure he puts on the perimeter. He was another point guard option. And now Nebraska's point guard situation it's pretty thin. It's Sam Grissel, Jamarcus Lawrence, and Sam Hoiberg is actually the third point guard. They're not going to take the red shirt off for Mel Lloyd. So I guess I don't know on that one. Maybe there's more to it. This could be useful for a guy like Ramel, I would think, to play some, but maybe that's not what's wanted at this point. I don't know. And also he's been working more with the scout team. So that's sort of been his focus, as being the pretend, version of who they're playing. And so he would have to make a dramatic adjustment, but it's going to be tough. It just is. I mean, I guess if you want silver lining, and it's kind of hard right now, but it's that Denham and Jamarcus Lawrence are going to just play a lot of minutes. Denham is already playing 30 plus a game. Jamarcus is only going to go up. And you really hope whatever the wins and losses are, that those two guys in particular, I think, are like, you're feeling really good as this progresses. Like they're just getting better and better. That's the best hope.
So I was asked this yesterday on AM radio 1620 The Zone about just kind of what the injuries mean for the conversation around the season as a whole. Because you still have, Fred has metrics that are not written down for kind of what the season looks like. How do you think that these two injuries to Gary and to Bandoumel shape the conversation about a season where you also, you beat Creighton at home, or you beat Creighton on the road. You almost beat Purdue at home. You beat Iowa at home. You've been competitive in a lot of Big Ten games. I guess what do these two injuries kind of do to shape the conversation in your mind as this season goes along for what it kind of means for the program going forward?
I think you have to. It's hard to believe Trev Alberts wouldn't to have sort of a nuanced view of it. Of basically, it feels to me, this is probably oversimplification, but Hoiberg did really change the style of team he had this year. Like he kind of went a completely different direction. You could tell they got a lot grittier. They were going to get your fingernails dirty type of guys with like Gary and Grissel and Bandoumel. And sometimes it's been frustrating to watch on the offensive end because there's not like they have amazing shooters there or anything, but those guys would fight and they would make people earn it. And Nebraska was, I believe, 7-3 with some big wins, Creighton included, when those guys were all in the lineup. And one of the losses was that overtime game to Purdue where it was toe to toe. So as it was supposed to be, you just wish you could have seen that for a full season, because I think we could have been talking about something interesting. And I really do believe that. Like, I think they could have been a team that was on the cusp, either NIT, March Madness. Now it's really hard to picture that without those guys. But I do think you have to factor in the injuries, and you got to say, well, is this maybe this is now the direction. And this is why Dawson and Lawrence are so big down the stretch, because if those guys look good, if like Breidenbach started to look, he has been better of late. And if he started to look solid, and then you thought, okay, maybe Gary's coming back because he could come back, then people might think, if they could add an offensive scorer, somebody just really special, that one guy, I would watch that. And maybe that's when it takes off. So some people will say, hey, he's been around a while, and the record is what it is. But I think there are others who will look at it like they sort of reset it this past year, and I kind of like where this is trending. And that might be how Trev sees it too.
Yeah, the roster construction this season has been markedly different than what it had been previously. I think the assistant coaching hires that they made, especially Howard handling the defense, have been good ones. And with the guys that they've added, so we'll see. I do wonder. Sometimes things like this can be like a rallying point for young guys. I don't know if you can kind of get past that. We'll see. They've got Northwestern at home tonight at 6 p.m. on. We'll see what they can do against the Wildcats, who knocked off Wisconsin a couple.
Yeah,
days
they're pretty
ago,
good actually. So that could be a tough matchup. But yeah, if that would be a nice win if they got it.
All right. Anything else?
I'd say we covered a decent amount of ground.
Okay.
I don't have anything more to say. So we do have a lot though on the site. There is a lot more to write, and we are writing it. There's offers always going out. There's always something new every day, it seems like, isn't there? Like, you don't know quite what it's going to be always, but something's coming. And that's good. This is an exciting time, I think, for Husker football and the recruiting, and there's just the energy there. So you should really come to Husker 247 for all the latest. We'll have it there. Thanks for listening.